Ascension Sunday is an odd Sunday to celebrate, really. Which might be why many churches and pastors consider it optional. We celebrate essentially that we've been left behind. That Jesus has left us behind. Emmanuel, God with us, is no longer present with us. But Barbara Brown Taylor wonders, isn't that really the one reason, underneath all the other reasons, we are here in church? Because we have sensed God's absence, and our hollow nights, our pondering hearts, our unanswered prayers, and because those things have not discouraged us from coming here, but have in fact brought us to seek the presence we are missing. You know, we all look for God in so many places. Some of us spend most of the service staring up here at our skylight, looking for God in the light pouring down on us. Others of us stare at our stained glass, at the refracted light coming through it, hoping maybe God is there. Some of us expect to find God in a pastor or a guru. And some of us feel that if we could just go on a pilgrimage to some holy site, we might find God there. A wonderful movie came out a few years back, an animated film by Disney Pixar called Up. Some of you may have seen it. It tells this beautiful love story between a balloon salesman and a teacher, a man named Carl and his wife, Ellie. And in several scenes, they land on their backs, staring up into the clouds, pointing out different ones that look like dreams they're hoping for in their future. One of the clouds looks like a baby. And they get pregnant. But when they lose the baby and realize they won't be able to have children, they return to the grass and look up yet again and find some new clouds and some new dreams. Travel, adventure. This mutual dream they had both had since they were children. But things keep coming up. Car breaks down, house needs a new roof, thing after thing. And every little penny they had saved for their travel and adventure gets used up. And travel and adventure get put off and put off and put off. Finally, Ellie gets terminally ill and dies. And Carl feels like such a failure because he never made her dreams come true. And so in classic animated fashion, Carl, the balloon salesman, attaches a massive number of balloons to his house and takes off into the sky. He's going to head to this majestic waterfall they had always dreamed of visiting. And he's so focused on achieving that dream, somehow rectifying what they failed to do during Ellie's life. He's so single-minded that he hardly notices the beautiful life that's happening all around him. The way Ellie is reflected all around him. Especially in the earnest smile of a Boy Scout who stows away on his porch and is clinging to the railing as the house raises off into the sky. But at the very end of the film, with his house back planted in its lot in the middle of the city, and after this wild trip that Carl feels has been all wrong and didn't really achieve what he was trying to achieve, Ellie's dream, He sits in the living room and he is depressed and moping, and he feels all alone, having humbugged that Boy Scout that kept nagging him and bugging him. And he notices sitting there next to him a book that his wife had made as a child. My Adventure Book, reads the cover. And he opens it and begins to flip through the pages. And of course he expects it to be mostly empty. They didn't make it on very many adventures, after all. But as he flips the pages, instead of finding them empty, he finds them filled with snapshots from all these little moments throughout his life together with Ellie. There's a picture of them out in front of their first house, celebrating birthdays, sharing picnics in the park. And on the last page, read the words, "Thank you for the adventure, Ellie." "Why are you looking up?" ask these men in white robes after Jesus disappears from sight into a cloud. And as if to answer for the disciples, Loretta Ross, in the poem that Bev so beautifully read this morning, lets out this poetic sigh that reflects all of our emotions when we feel abandoned or lost. Why are we looking up? Because we feel lost without him. Because we're going to stare at that point where we last saw him, hoping he will reappear. You know, I wonder if the disciples had had a massive amount of balloons like Carl, if they would have just headed up into the sky after Jesus. Biblical commentator David Cunningham writes, "The ascension is not so much about the physical act of ascension, or even the reuniting of the incarnate Word with the unbegotten source. Rather, it is about making space so that the mission of the church can begin." You see, as long as the disciples had Jesus there, physically present with them, they had no reason to look anywhere else. They had no reason to go anywhere else. But Jesus wanted them to go, had a purpose for them, had selected them for a mission. Yes, it might, as our poet described this morning, feel like being left to knock around in the flesh. And yes, they may feel that they no longer belong to the world. They may feel that they are ready to be caught up in that eternal dance with the source of all life, that they are already being caught up in it. But that's why Jesus picked them. Because it's only those who can understand that they belong to something deeper, something eternal, who can change the world. Joelle and Jacob, our 2 one-year-olds, love to play hide and seek right now. And sometimes we sit them backwards on the couch so they're facing the cushions. And we hide behind the couch and we pop up in different places. There's always shrieks of delight and little giggles and laughter. And until recently, wherever we disappeared was where they continued to stare. And they were always so surprised when we would reappear in a different place. In fact, sometimes when we would reappear in a different place, they'd be so focused on staring at that place where we disappeared that we'd have to call their name from this new place we reappeared. But there's sometimes when we disappear that in our absence, they turn their gaze and they look at each other. Like when we leave them in the nursery, try to secretly disappear without them noticing. And we watch them on the baby monitor. And without our faces, they catch one another's, and I think they're a little caught off guard. Because so much of their focus has been on their moms. But they have failed to discover one another, even though they're right there in the same room so much of the time. They fail to see in one another's face our love and our personality and characteristics reflected back to them. And so it's this beautiful moment when they actually catch each other's face and interact. And we hear those same squeals of delight and laughter coming out of the nursery. Barbara Brown Taylor writes of the Ascension story. No one standing around watching them that day could have guessed what an astounding thing happened when they all stopped looking into the sky and looked at each other instead. She writes, on the surface, it was not a great moment. 11 abandoned disciples with nothing to show for all their following. But in the days and years to come, it would become very apparent what had happened to them. When nothing but a promise and a prayer left to them, those 11 people consented to be the church. And nothing was ever the same again, beginning with them. The followers became the leaders, the listeners became preachers, the converts became missionaries, the healed became healers. She says it was almost as if Jesus had ascended, or not ascended, but exploded, so that all the holiness that was once concentrated in him alone flew everywhere, flew far and wide, so that the seeds of heaven were sown over all the earth. I love the way Barbara Brown Taylor describes things. You know, even as a pastor, I often might find myself praying the prayer, Jesus, be present here or there, in this situation or that. Help us feel your presence. It's sort of a silly prayer to pray, really. I believe that God, Jesus, the Spirit, are with us wherever we go. I believe that God is a love that pursues us relentlessly, as the psalm describes, Psalm 139. Wherever we go. And yet that prayer bubbles up in my heart, like one staring neck craned up into the sky. Sometimes I think I feel like I have to call down God's presence and comfort for people who are grieving or in fear or loneliness. And sometimes I forget that if I just drop my eyes, ground them here on earth, and stare deeply into the souls around me, that Jesus, by the power of the Holy Spirit, will show up in unexpected places. I forget that divine, eternal dance will spark into a swirling phenomenon of love around us as this mysterious thing happens when the Spirit unites us together and empowers us to care for God's creation. This thing called community. Next Sunday is Pentecost. It's the day we celebrate the fiery, powerful receiving of the Holy Spirit. The day we celebrate the birthday of the church. The day we celebrate that Spirit that enables us to understand and love one another. But the celebration of Pentecost is birthed out of this Sunday. Birthed out of this experience of Jesus' absence. And the reminder not to stare at the sky or escape by trying to follow Jesus with climbing gear or balloons or wings or whatever it is. But to stay put in this place, stay put and look around and get going with the work of community. Closing that last page of Ellie's adventure book, Carl decides he's going to head out on a new adventure, what he now understands as love and relationship. And in the final scenes of the movie, we see him spending time getting ice cream, having fun with that quirky, earnest Boy Scout that he thought had been distracting him from his purpose all along, but turned out to really be his purpose. God be with us as we learn to drop our eyes